Hello, viewers, to the Where Are They Now series from NC Idea. In celebration of our 20th year, we thought, what a crazy idea. Let's meet some of the folks that were there at the beginning, or at least in the early days, and connect with them now and see their overnight successes 10, 15, 20 years in the making. So, with that being said, today it is my great pleasure to introduce you to the founder of Guerrilla RF, Ryan Pratt. Ryan, thank you so much for being here today.
Yep, great to be here, Tom.
So, for the benefit of people tuning in, can we start with just a little bit of biographical background? Where were you before Guerrilla RF, and like what led you to where you are in founding this company?
Sure. No, that's a good question, good opportunity. So for me, I've kind of been in the semiconductor industry a long time. My father, Bill Pratt, actually co-founded a company called RF Micro Devices that today is called Qorvo. They're a large public semiconductor company. And so when he first started RF Micro, I was in elementary school, middle school. So even when I was in high school, I was working there. Nights, weekends, summers, sometimes helping out. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, so I went to NC State, got my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and started as an engineer, a circuit design engineer at RF Micro Devices right out of school in 2000. Worked there as a circuit design engineer, worked my way up into technical management, and was able to, lead a lot of successful programs there, develop a lot of cool products. One of the first power amplifiers I developed, which is a type of chip, actually went in the very first iPhone. So that was pretty cool.
That's understatement. That's more than pretty cool. That's pretty freaking awesome, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was fun. A lot of work. That was hard. Me and the team at RF Micro Devices, a lot of great folks there. So had a lot of fun there. Left RF Micro in 2008 to open a new product design center for a competitor of theirs called Skyworks Solutions. So I opened this design center here in Greensboro, North Carolina. Grew that from just myself to about 50 people in that design center, working on products again for cell phones. And then left Skyworks in 2013. And in thinking about what I wanted to do next in my career, I got some great advice from my dad. He, I knew what I wanted to do, the kinds of markets and customers I wanted to work with, but no one would hire me for that. Everyone wanted me to work on cellular phone type products. And I was more interested in kind of high performance products. And so my dad just said, well, easy, just start your own company and you can work on whatever you want.
Yeah, easy peasy, right?
Yeah, exactly, easy. And so I laughed it off because, like I saw how hard that was, and it hasn't gotten easier. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me, and the more I felt like I saw a clear opportunity in the industry that was kind of an unfilled niche that I felt could leverage, my skills, my experience, and could be a successful company.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
You said that you were inspiring to create integrated circuits for high performance. Like you were being pulled into the cellular telephone industry, but you wanted to be in quote high performance devices.
Yep.
What's differentiate? Like I think that, to the layperson, myself included, right? This gadget here has got a lot of high tech in it.
Oh yeah.
So what would be high performance compared to like a cell phone?
Sure. So cell phones are mass market items. They sell somewhere around 1 billion of those a year.
Got it.
And so they run on batteries. And so with a cell phone, you've got to be extremely efficient, use as low energy as you can. And that's kind of the challenge of that. The other big challenge is the refresh cycle. You're lucky if you get your product shipping in volume for more than a year. So it's a new product development constantly. For by high performance, I'm talking about markets like wireless infrastructure, those cell towers on the other end of the phone that are there for 3, 5, 10 years. That technology, military and defense, precision
Yep.
navigation,
Got it.
automotive. You know, these are kind of higher performance applications where the challenge is different. It's not all about efficiency, it's about raw performance. You know, it's kind of like designing Ferraris, right,
Right.
versus Chevys.
I appreciate that. And that's a great distinction. As soon as you said, the a billion are made, I was like, oh yeah, I should have been able to figure that out. I get you. Like that's not necessarily where the sexy, exciting, cool applications, to say
Yep.
nothing of Intel, DoD type applications. I'm sure there are uses of your technology, and you probably got your hands in stuff that would make feeble brains like mine spin without even recognizing that that's a possibility. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. So, so your dad, put you on this, path, said, hey, make it your own. And did I hear correctly? You left dad's company to go work for a competitor?
I did, yeah. So, you know, as with most public companies, you know, the RF Micro kind of reached a point where, unfortunately, the co founders were forced out. The company had
Yeah.
different objectives. And so my dad was forced out of RF Micro into retirement, where he's very happy. Um, but it was a little weird for me being his son at the company after he got forced out. And it just felt to me like it was time for a new opportunity in the industry. And so I met a great guy named Greg Waters, who's a great executive in the semiconductor space. He recruited me over to Skyworks. And yeah, that was kind of how that came to be.
That's very cool. And I'm sure by doing that, it really expanded your view, your worldview, so to speak.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was very helpful, certainly in developing me into the executive I am today. Because at Skyworks, when I started that design center, it was just me. And so, yes, I had a big company backing me and lots of support there. But feet on the ground, you know, like how to order toilet paper, how to get office supplies, how to get cubicles ordered, and just all kinds of things. Sticking to a budget, many skills that served me very well in starting Guerrilla RF. I learned in that experience at Skyworks.
Yeah, a lot of people underappreciate, the chief cook and bottle washer duties of a founder. I once remember in one of my startups, we were hiring people, and we had the candidates coming in and waiting in the waiting room or the conference room, and my office manager was like, oh, the bathrooms in the women's bathroom, the toilets in the women's bathroom are overflowing. Somebody's got to do something. I'm like, I'm on it. So I grabbed the mop in the bucket. I'm in there, and this candidate that I was going to be interviewing came early, and she asked to use the restroom, and I was coming out just as she was going in. I'm like, oh, 1 second, go ahead. We go our separate ways. And then 10 minutes later, we find ourselves sitting in the conference room. And as she walks in, she looks at me. She said, oh, I think I'm in the wrong room. I was like, oh, I know where this is going. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, why did you think you might be in the wrong room? But I'm meeting the president of the agency. And I was like, yeah, so you put in your brain, the guy with the bucket and the mop couldn't possibly be the head of the agency. That's what you do when you're small. You have no choice, right? You got to be
Yep.
nimble. And I had developers on the floor below the women's bathrooms. My biggest worry was that water would start dripping, and we'd have to move the developers. And their cycles were like gold. Like I couldn't spare a single cycle in the product development phase. So I get that. Well, I appreciate that kind of the background. So like let's brag a little bit about Guerrilla RF before we take a stroll down memory lane. Like so today, your publicly traded company doing what and where and how?
Sure. So we're a publicly traded company today. Not quite as far as we want to get yet. We still got a ways to go. And so, this past year, we did in excess of $20 million in revenue. We're able to expand our gross margins, into the mid 60s, which is pretty good for a hardware company, especially a semiconductor company. We've been posting strong growth. We grew something like 35% last year, year over year. We've got around 65 full-time employees. We've got our nice facility we moved in here about 2 years ago. That really sets us up for a lot of future growth. Guerrilla RF, we're very strong in, again, those kind of high performance markets like we talked about. Wireless infrastructure, automotive is a key market for us, military defense, again, wireless repeaters. A lot of these different markets we've had a lot of success in. So in automotive, for example, we're shipping into almost every major car brand sold in the U.S. One of our most common applications is the shark fin antenna that you see on the roof of a lot of cars. That's where the satellite radio receiver is. And so we've got a chipset for that. So yeah, we're kind of widespread, growing fast.
Are you by chance doing anything in the LiDAR space?
We are not. We're not. We're purely in the electromagnetic part of the spectrum, not the kind of light or laser or photonic part.
I was just asking. It would have been a coincidence of coincidences, but one of our earliest companies, I think it was in the very first grant cycle we did, was Transloc. Who, if you're familiar with Transloc, they were over here in Durham. They were in that LiDAR space. They got acquired by Ford, and I think they've been sold again since. But I just thought, like, how cool would that have been if there were like two of you collaborating in any type of way? But I appreciate that, and I did do some homework, and I think what was it, MMICs that was in microwave again. I am sure you've got at least 50 IQ points on me. It's a space that I was really struggling to understand. But the point for viewers and listeners is that it's really cool, super high tech.
Yeah. MMICs are microwave monolithic integrated circuits. They're microchips, and they're kind of our specialty are these microchips for RF amplifiers. So they take a little signal, make it big, both in transmission and in receiving. You can think of our receiver chips kind of like hearing aids, and they just that antenna pick up a very distant, faint signal. But anything involving wireless communications, there's a very high probability there's an RF amplifier, a radio frequency amplifier involved. And so that's kind of our specialty. We make these microchips that are, a lot of them are RF amplifiers of one type or another. Not all. We're offering a diversified product portfolio. We have something like about 165 products in mass production right now and constantly growing. But yeah, that's kind of what we do. That's our specialty.
Is that are those big round antennas you see on tops of like big office buildings and on tops of cell towers? Because someone once told me that that's where a lot of the microwave transmissions happen. Those big round, whatever you want to call them.
That's one kind. That's like a point-to-point backhaul link.
Okay.
And so those are used for high-speed wireless backhaul. So, you can't run fiber optic every single place for data. And so there's a lot of usage of these microwave backhaul or microwave wireless links.
So I'm sorry, how many products did you say you have now? 65?
165.
165.
Yep.
So the reason I'm asking is I've got your 2013 grant application here.
Oh,
And I think
cool.
this will be the way we start strolling down memory lane, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And in traction, the section on traction, you say we have designed and simulated over 10 new products
Yep.
with minimal work left before prototype fabrication. And under challenges, a final big challenge will be to achieve a major design win from a customer once we have prototype hardware.
Yep.
That's got to take you back.
Yep, yep. And I remember, talking with a few folks, and they were just like, "Well, 10 products. What are you thinking? You should just come up with one really good one." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. Like our business plan is to have a catalog. Customers don't want to buy just one part. They want to buy all the pieces that they need to build a radio, and there are dozens of parts they need. So, if they can't come to us for at least several of those blocks, we'll never get off the ground." And so I just remember getting a lot of skepticism of how are you going to develop 10 products?
You bring up an exceptional point that's profound and it could just slide by easily without being kind of pulled out. So let me do that. Here you were a nascent entrepreneur. Sure, you had a lot of industry expertise, just from your upbringing in your father's company and what you studied at State and then what you did before. But you were still kind of newbie to doing it yourself, right? And building your own company. And founders seek out mentoring and advice from others, but it's there's a certain assumption, I think, to people that don't do this for a living, like we do at NC Idea, that like everything you're told is gold and you should follow that advice. And there's a certain sense and a responsibility to the founder to you've got to discern, right? You're going to get conflicting feedback. And I think a lot of people don't understand that most successful entrepreneurs, they're not aiming, at a target. They're aiming at where their targets are going, because there's going to be time in travel and you need to meet them where they are, when they are, with the products that they need then. And to me, that's kind of what you had already intuitively understood when you were saying, yeah, we're not going to do, because the old mantra is, right, like just kill one, get it right, like kill one and do it. And that's kind of the private equity, Silicon Valley, pitch and plan and pitch mantra. But like, you knew already out of the gate, you had to have a menu.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, and I think what you allude to there was probably one of the biggest challenges I had as an entrepreneur was, I was very fortunate in that I had access to several fantastic mentors, and they almost never agreed on anything. And so figuring out who to listen to and who not to listen to on even one individual question, because that was very difficult. Like my father, for example, was a fantastic mentor,
Oh yeah.
but there were a couple times where I just had to say, "Yeah, you're wrong on this one, Dad. I'm basically going to ignore you." One of the best examples of that was in the very beginning. When my father started his company, he had two co-founders. My father was kind of the technical engineer. He had another, technical person helping him. And then they brought in a guy that was a sales and marketing expert. And he insisted that I could not, it was a bad idea for me to be a sole founder, and that I really needed another, I'm very technical, and so I needed another sales marketing co-founder, because that was kind of his recipe and how it worked for him. And I certainly did not debate that. Yes, I need a lot of help in sales and marketing. That is not my expertise. But I couldn't find a co-founder willing, with those skill sets, willing to come aboard. And so he kind of got to the point where he was like, "Well, maybe you should think about just not starting the company if you can't find that co-founder." And it was funny because it pissed me off. Like, why can't I do it alone? And
All right.
so I finally just got to the point where, you know what, screw you. I'm going to prove you're wrong, and I'm going to do it alone. And I did. And, it was funny. We laugh about it now. And he was like, no,
Right.
you were right. I was wrong. And by the way, my first hire was a salesperson, just not a co-founder.
Yep.
And so that was an important lesson I learned, but it never got easier of figuring out when to trust your own gut and when to listen to advice you're getting. It's hard. It's hard, but you've got to somehow find that balance.
Yeah. Again, I'm so happy we started with you on this because there's so much nutritional value to this conversation, especially for those that are following in your footsteps. Because as you know, we continue with the Seed Grant program, and we've augmented it now with a micro grant program. And since your cohort, we've probably funded another close to 300 companies in the last 9 years.
Yeah, that's
And
fantastic.
yeah, there's definitely economic impact, but this 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 story is not ours; it's yours. And so I'd like to stay, if we could, that 2013 timeframe. You've hung out your shingle, so to speak. You just described as yourself as coming out solo. So what were those early couple years like? Well, if you don't mind me asking you, just from a kind of historical standpoint, reflecting on the ecosystem as it was then, in the support that you got, and kind of as your perception has changed, as your needs have changed, and as you have grown, right? um, I have the privilege of talking to Lisa and Sam with some frequency, and I've been getting over the years the occasional update on Guerrilla RF. So I know you've kind of gone out and the funding, you've had the funding exercises to get through before you got to the markets. And I just would be fascinated to get your take on like where the ecosystem was as you were starting, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how you see it today.
Mhm.
And this is your show, so to speak. So if we don't, no need to edit yourself. I'm not trying to bait you into saying anything that's crazy, but like, yours is the opinion that is the ones that matter because you're living it and doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I having been in industry, I was totally unaware of the startup ecosystem when I first decided to start the company, and that was really my first 6 months was learning everything I could about starting up a company, learning about the ecosystem, learning about what a minimum viable product is, learning about what investors care about, because I knew I needed investors from the jump. I knew this could not be a self funded or bootstrap company. I just don't see any way you can do that with semiconductors. And so, I really dug in, did a lot of research, developed a business plan, developed the strategy, the vision for the company.
How did you figure all that out in the early stages? Like, did you just Google business
Yeah,
plan, or no
yeah,
kidding? Good for
literally.
you.
Just I Googled it. I found a few blog posts. There's a few VCs that had, I assume they're still out there, have blogs. And I just I devoured everything I could find on the web. Learning about what is it, the product canvas or something canvas. Learning about all these concepts. Just reading as much as I could on the internet, Googling, lots of stuff, and of course, beginning to find local, parts of the ecosystem. Like you mentioned, Sam and Lisa at Nussbaum was just Sam back then. Getting introduced into the community, meeting people, going to events both here in Greensboro and then over in the Triangle area. Finally getting hooked in with NC Idea.
How did that happen? Do you recall? Did you know somebody that knew somebody, or did you just
Um,
stumble into it?
I'm pretty sure I stumbled into it. I think maybe Sam had referred me. And so I just saw that there was this grant program. And what I saw was the money. And so I'm like, man, that
Most do.
50,000, that could be a lot of help. I knew exactly how to use it. Both for doing a patent for our first circuits, and paying for these first prototypes to get our first products. And so to me, that was the main draw, was this grant. I knew exactly what to do with it. I knew it was impactful. Um, and so I think I just applied through the web. I didn't know anybody at NCIDEA yet at that time. I just applied, and lo and behold, somebody emailed me back, and and it kind of went from there.
That's I'm a little surprised, to be honest with you. There's so much of this, the kind of the stereotype is like you got to know somebody, right? So I just was expecting you to say, my predecessor Dave Rizzo, who's ostensibly the founder of NCIDEA, that maybe you had some connective tissue to Dave
Yeah.
or John Cambier or Lister Delgado. And
Yep.
I looked us up on LinkedIn. We have about 65 shared contacts, and one of the first that jumped up was Lee Buck, and Lee was on the board that hired me 9 years ago. So we've got pretty obvious mutual connections. So I just assumed, but the fact that you just kind of you did elbow grease and it got you here, that's fantastic. And again, to founders or aspiring entrepreneurs watching this, right? This is the demystification of the process. It's just the doing,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Because that's what you're, whether you intend it or not, or maybe it's the way my broken brain works. That's what you're oozing to me, is that you've just been an example and a master of just process, of activity, of doing things, orienting towards action, self-empowered, not waiting for somebody to give you the answer, but to go find it. And that's great, because there was the system was a little different back then. But as I went over your proposal and like sources and or uses of funds and things like that, the small commentary that I can distill from the previous crew was that it seemed like it was a fairly easy decision. It's what most people don't know about the process, and it's true today as it was back in your day, and even those that were before you. It's still kind of a relative competition, right?
Sure.
So you can fill out the best possible application that you could ever, and whether or not you still prevail, there's a percentage of that is determined based upon other applications that are coming into that cohort, right? There's still this relative comparison. And so my guess is, this application that was written so many years ago would probably be competitive today. So I'm guessing it was probably a pretty easy decision for the folks back then to make that, because as far as product companies go in the electronic space, you were beyond just an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you still didn't have your catalog built yet, but you were well beyond just the idea phase. So kudos to you. Now, you said you knew you couldn't start the company without raising capital. To the extent you're willing to share what that process has been like, I'm assuming you did kind of the usual activities and went to the usual suspects early on to the capital stack as it was back then here.
Yeah, yeah. So NCIDEA was kind of my first stop, my first funding that was outside of friends and family. And it was amazing for us because I had spoken to a few angel investors, or angel investor organizations at the time. And it was funny, a few were interested, but man, as soon as I was a finalist and then got the award from NCIDEA, all of a sudden, all these angel investors were like, all right, let's do a deal. And so I think it was incredibly impactful, because I think it was instant credibility with a lot of angel investors that, okay, this is interesting, but man, if they got an NCIDEA grant, there must really be something here. So that was extremely helpful. So we won the award in late 13, got the money in early 14, and really within a month or two had raised about $1 million after receiving that grant. And then we closed on our first formal round, I guess our seed round of funding, which I think was like about 1.5 million, 1.8 million, something like that. by the summer of 2014. And so, yeah, it kind of went from there. Angel investors, moving our way up, up until we just completed a larger round for us last fall, even or in August of 24. We raised 22 million. That was our largest single investment
Yeah,
round done.
that's a little bit of money. That's a decent little round. In those early days, or even to the current, is a lot of it local, or half and half, or mostly out of state? I mean, I would imagine the earliest rounds were local.
Mhm. Yeah, up until this deal we did in August, most of it was local. A lot of angel investors in the state, but a sprinkling of folks outside. But yeah, a lot of it was local. I think I'd have to add it up, but we raised with that 22 million. I think we're at about 65 million raised in 13 years with Guerrilla RF, and probably a half to 2/3 of that is from North Carolina.
So all the usual suspects.
Yeah, just angels. No VC or anything like that.
But when you say angels, you mean individuals or funds? So idea fund partners, Bull City, co-founders.
None of them.
None
Just
of.
So like Piedmont Angel Network,
Okay,
who is now
something else,
they go by a different name now.
right? But it was Pan back then, right?
Correct. And then Charlotte Angel Fund was another one.
Calf, Greg Brown
Yep.
served on my board
Yep,
for
exactly.
6 years. He was awesome.
Yep. And then just individuals.
Anybody? So you're a state grad. Did you ever go back through like the Wolfpack Investor Network or?
It didn't really exist when we were raising.
Oh yeah, point of order. Duh. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, you bring up a salty point for me because like as soon as we found out about Win, I was like, okay, awesome. Let's go talk with those guys. And it's like, oh, well, we just do seed funding. And
Yeah, you'd have been way too mature for that.
exactly. Which, I get it. It was annoying because like when I needed it, it wasn't there.
Yep.
And
No,
now you find out they launch it, which is great. And I'm glad, several organizations have launched, kind of back to your original question of the ecosystem back then versus now. I think there's a lot more options for early stage now than there was back then. I think I will say, I think for kind of this growth stage, I don't see much around here. I didn't see it much back then, and I don't see it now, especially for hardware. And so I would say that's my complaint is I would love to see more growth stage private investment in North Carolina.
you're not the only one making that observation, so that tells me you are spot on. I've been seeing that just from my own background doing this work on a national and global scale. I know other states. I shared this with some economic development folks in late December. I know states that are putting together $1 to $1.5 billion Series B growth investment specifically for the purpose of rating good companies in other states, because there is a gap that's been identified. Who can write a $20 to $50 million check, right? And as entrenched and as great as your story is here, or in the triad, right? If you needed to raise 50 million right now, and if a fund was willing to write that check but said, oh, but you have to move to Cleveland, Ohio, or come down to San Diego, like, I don't know that you would do it, but it sure as heck would give you pause, wouldn't it?
Sure. Yeah, you
And
have to think about it. Absolutely.
exactly, because you have, I mean, you got to do, ultimately you're responsible for keeping the company on that upward trajectory. So that's out there. And I think the states that see that and are amassing those types of resources, I think they're playing chess, and a lot of others in economic development are still playing checkers.
Yeah. Yep, I
So
would agree.
we're gonna, as we amplify this story to certain people in certain corridors of power, hopefully coming from you versus me, who they see as somebody that has a vested interest, hopefully that will, hit and motivate some action on that.
Yeah,
So
like I said, that round we just did back in August, that 22 million, that was from a kind of hedge fund out of Boston. So that was not local. So even at this point, we can't raise locally anymore.
I would say, in their defense, in defense of the local capital stack, like with certain exceptions, like Hatters, that's in the biospace, right? So
Sure.
they're still doing like big long ball. You've pretty much outgrown,
Yeah.
I think, the capacity of anybody locally,
Yep.
and so I wouldn't want to kind of berate them for that. It's just
No,
that,
no. It's just it's an example exactly as you said. It's a gap.
right, right. Is there just out of curiosity, like as you reflect on your these last X years, has there been something, an inflection point, maybe a challenge that you overcame? Was there, is there something? Yeah, I guess that is kind of funny because that's like, well, that's called Tuesday around here. But
Yeah.
was there something that you really reflect on and go, wow, that was momentous, right? Like that could have gone one of two very divergent ways,
Mhm.
and it went this way. I know it's a fluffy puffy question, but
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated to hear those stories from founders.
Yeah, no, I mean there've been several along the way. I think the products we developed, the pace at which we emphasize growth versus profitability has kind of moved around some. I certainly for us in 2023 was a very hard year for the company. We were in a high growth phase, and we were dependent upon raising money from the capital markets, and the capital markets basically closed
They
when
did.
interest rates started going up. And so we had to shift gears very rapidly in the second half of 23 from growth at all costs mode into a very preservation mode. And that was hard. That could have gone way worse than it did. Thankfully, 2024 was a much better year. We were able to pull out of it. We were able to consolidate, and had a much better year. But that was a big fork in our road. Was the second half of 2023, just from a financial markets shift point of view. And so the strategy had to change quickly. And I think had we not responded as fast as we did, it would have been very easy, for Guerrilla RF to not be around anymore. But we did, and going back earlier, there again, if when you're not generating cash, you're dependent upon an investor's willingness to invest in you.
Right.
And that gets scary. It gets old.
It
And so
does.
that's why, we've really concentrated a lot now that we are in pretty solid growth phase, to getting profitable as fast as we can. And that's kind of another, that went along with it, kind of a new direction for the company.
Speaking of new directions, getting onto the publicly traded exchange, has that fundamentally altered anything like in your management style? I mean, is the regulatory, I just kind of assume there's like a regulatory component now that you had the luxury of ignoring or not even having to do or deal with. Is the juice been worth the squeeze?
Uh, I think everyone, I'm of two minds. It is painful. It's expensive, right? Being a public company. And so there are a lot of negatives there. But for us, it was the only way we could find to raise the amounts of money we needed to raise. So since we became public, we've raised something like, I think out of that 65 million, 40 million of it has been since we're public. And so we could not find investors willing to invest those amounts of money into a privately held semiconductor company. I'm sure they're out there, but we looked high and low. We could not find them. Alls we could find, the only way we could find to raise that money was through the public markets. And, it's hard to complain, right? That money has gotten us where we are. We would not be a third of the size that we are. We would not have the products that we have. We would definitely not have the revenue that we have had we not been able to raise that capital. And so for us, as painful as it's been, looking back, I just still don't see another path we could have taken. But of course, if you can get access to that kind of money without going to public markets, absolutely, it's a no-brainer. Stay
Right.
private. But for us, it just wasn't a viable path.
We're going to run out of time soon. So I did want to point something out, because here again, you are a tremendous example. I do a little bit of homework for these calls, and I see that your family has a private foundation.
Mhm.
And I'm imagining that probably coincided around the time Dad was stepping away, and you have those kind of events, those life events, where you can take a breath and you actually have some resources to serve social causes that the family deems important.
Yep.
Is that really, first of all, thank you for doing that work. People take those kinds of activities for granted. Trust me, I know, having worked at very, very large foundations that made hundreds of millions of dollars worth of grants. It's easily how for granted that gets taken, but it's just example of how so many founders generously give back. So now I'll meander this back to the closing question I was going is, what's that look like for you? Like, is it to get it to a size where you're just too damn appetizing to a much bigger company? They just have to have you. And then you can take that break point to decide what you're going to do. Cause you look like a relatively young man. So like you could work yourself to death for the next 40 years in this,
Yeah.
or you could do something else to the extent you're willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I don't really know. I mean, certainly Guerrilla RF has always been intended to be a real company. I've seen other startups that were intended to be sold off as fast as possible. And we didn't like that approach. We wanted to build a real company that could be a real company and stand on its own.
Create value.
Yeah, infinite, forever. Now, of course, the semiconductor market is very active with M&A. And, I think eventually somebody's going to figure out how profitable the lanes we've occupied are. And if, they want to offer us a big check for that, of course I'm going to take their money and, move on to the next thing. But, for right now, there's no like active plan, for positioning the company for some kind of rapid exit. The plan right now is profitable growth, which is sometimes kind of an oxymoron, but we think we can do it with the margins we have. We can reinvest our profits once we get there into the growth further, and it's a lot of fun. We're really having a lot of fun with the products, with the portfolio, with the customers we're getting. It's a very fun experience. I'm 47 now, so I definitely have
A
a ways
youngster.
left in my career. So, not looking for an immediate exit. But, again, who knows what the future holds? I think for us, it's just really executing, heads down, execute. And, let's see what happens.
The work is its own reward. Boy, we are kindred spirits, separated by a decade in time. You're still a youngster, so I'm just so pleased to hear you say that. I think that's the most honest answer you can give, right? Never say never, but let's focus on building a profitable company. And in doing so, you're creating tremendous impact for the state of North Carolina. You're creating, something valuable, not just in the jobs, right? Because that's my closing commentary has always been, to the extent anybody will listen, you all, this is the fabric of our economy. Collectively, startups are generating well more, the majority of nascent new or all net new jobs in the state of North Carolina. And you just don't get the attention you deserve because there's no ribbon cutting opportunity to say we're going to support an investment in Guerrilla RF that's going to generate 40 more jobs and take you over 100, right? But we're going to do our part to change that narrative, and sharing your story is one way we do that. So thank you so much for finding the courage and the temerity to go ahead and do this, and that you continue to do it and put your shoulder to the stone. I hope you remember you're part of this family, even if I wasn't there at the beginning, but we're igniting, we're celebrating again this year our 20th anniversary. Guerrilla RF is one of many great companies that have been toiling in obscurity, but building great wealth and opportunity in the state. So thank you for that. And please do let us know if we can be helpful at any time in the future.
Absolutely. No, it's great to be part of the family. And, thank you very much for what you're doing. Because, like I said, the ecosystem, it's a lot better now than it was, but there's still more work to do.